My name is Harshita Chaudhari, and my topic name is a comparative analysis between private sector and public sector banks. So this is the overview of banking industry. So banking in India has its roots in the late 18th century. The earliest banks established during this period were the Bank of Hindustan, which operated from 1770 to 1829. And the General Bank of India, which was set up in 1786. Both of these banks are now defunct. The oldest surviving bank in India today is the State Bank of India, SBI. It originated as the Bank of Calcutta in June 1806. Uh, Shortly uh, after its establishment, it was renamed the Bank of Bengal. The Bank of Bengal was one of the three major presidency banks, the other two being the Bank of Bombay and the Bank of Madras. All three presidency banks were established by the charters from the British East India Company and they played a foundation role in shaping India's early banking systems. Uh, Next is the Empirical Bank of India was formed in 1921 through the merger of the three presidency banks, the Bank of Bengal, the Bank of Bombay, and the Bank of Madras. After India gained independence, this empirical bank was renamed the State Bank of India (SBI) in the year 1955. Initially, initially this presidency banks and their successors functioned like the central banks, that is, they handled some central banking responsibilities until the Reserve Bank of India was established in 1935 to serve as the official central bank of the country. In 1969, the Indian government nationalized all the major banks that it did not already own. Since then, these banks have continued to function under government ownership. These nationalized banks are structured as the public sector undertakings and are allowed to operate the commercially competing with private banks. The Indian banking sector is currently made up of four main types of banks, including public sector banks and state banks. In addition to this, commercial banks and several foreign banks since the 1990s expanding the scope and the competitiveness of the industry. Banking in India was generally fairly matured in terms of supply, product range, facilities, and reach even to rural India, and the poor still remains a challenge. So, uh, however, reaching people in rural areas and underprivileged communities still remains a challenge. To address this issue, the government has implemented the several strategies. For example, like the State Bank of India has been actively expanding its branch network to improve the access. Additionally, institutions like the National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, NABARD, have introduced the initiatives such as microfinance to promote rural development and financial inclusion. As of the fiscal year 2012 to 13, the Indian banking industry employed approximately 1 crore 1 lakh 75,000 1 lakh I think 1 crore 1 lakh 75,149 people. It had a total of 1 crore 9 lakh 8,011 branches across India and 171 branches in the foreign countries. These banks merge a total deposit of 67,504 billion, which is approximately US dollar 1.1 trillion. The total bank credit stood at the 52,604.59 billion, which equals to around the US dollar 880 billion. The net profit earned by all operating banks in India during that fiscal years was 1,027.51 billion, while their total turnover was 9,148.59 billion. History of banking industry. Now, in ancient India, the concept of banking can be traced back to the Vedic period beginning around the 1750 BC, where there is evidence that loans were being given. Later, during the Mayura dynasty, an instrument known as Adesha was in use. This was a type of payment order uh, issued issued by a banker to pay money to the third party, which is quite similar to what we now understand as a bill of exchange. So during the Buddhist period, the use of such financial instruments become more widespread. Merchants in large towns were known to give the letters of credit to one another, facilitating trade and financial transactions. This early system laid the foundation for what eventually evolved into the modern banking system. Post-independence era. The partition of India in 1947 had a several negative impact on the economies of Punjab and West Bengal, which in turn paraly- paralyzed banking activities in those regions for several months. With India's independence, India's independence, the earlier laissez-faire system, where the government had minimal interference in the economy, came to an end. The India, the Indian government began to adopt a more active role in economic development, particularly in the banking and finance sector. To shape the new economic landscape, the government introduced the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1948, which aimed to establish a mixed economy. This policy led to increased state involvement in different sectors, including banking and finance. The Reserve Bank of India, which serves as India's central banking authority, had been established earlier in April 1935. However, it was nationalized on January 1st, 1949, under the provision of the Reserve Bank of India Act 1948, making it fully government owned. Evolution of Evolution of PSB nationalization, public sector bank nationalization. Uh, this the process of nationalizing banks in India evolved in multiple phases. In 1955, the Reserve Bank of India acquired a 60% stake in the Imperial Bank of India. This move led to the creation of the State Bank of India. By 1959, seven regional banks had been merged into the SBI network, expanding its reach across the country. The second major wave of nationalization occurred on July 1969, when 14 major commercial banks were nationalized under the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. This move brought 84% of the country's bank branches under government control, significantly increasing the state's influence over the banking sector. The third wave of nationalization happened in 1980, when six more banks were nationalized. This step further broaden the reach of public sector banks, particularly in rural areas, making banking more accessible to the common public. These nationalization efforts laid the foundation for a strong government-led banking system that could support the India's broader economic and social development goals. Nationalization of banks in 1960s. At the time of India's independence, the country related faced two major challenges related to banking. The first challenge was the strong connection between banks and industrial houses, which led to a concentration of financial resources in the hands of a few. The second challenge was the neglect of the agricultural sector in banking policies and lending. There were also growing concerns regarding the frequent failures of banks, the poor soundness of banking practices, and the overall instability in the Indian banking sector. To address these issues, the State Bank of India was established and it began operations on July 1st, 1955, under the State Bank of India Act 1955. The primary objective of forming SBI was to expand the availability of banking services on a much larger scale than before, particularly in the neglected rural and semi-urban areas. In addition to economic concerns, there was also a growing fear that a few private business houses were gaining excessive control over the country's banking assets. To mitigate this risk, the government introduced a policy of social control over banking in December 1967, which came into effect on February 1, 1969. The central objective of this policy was to ensure a wider distribution of banking credit to prevent the misuse of banking resources and to channel more credit towards priority sectors of the economy. This social control aimed at promoting inclusive economic development by extending financial support to sectors that needed it the most, such as agriculture and small scale industries. To promote economic growth with social justice, the Government of India nationalized 14 major banks in 1969, followed by the nationalization of six more banks in 1980. These steps transformed the Indian banking system significantly. A major focus after nationalization was to make banking facilities more widely available in unbanked and rural areas. Additionally, there was a major shift in the lending priorities of banks. Instead of focusing mainly on large industries and business houses, banks were encouraged to lend to the priority sectors of the economy, which included agriculture, small and medium enterprise, and the micro sectors. These areas had not previously received sufficient attention. The government suc- succeeded in redirecting the credit to under the uh, sub-sectors, helping to stimulate rural development, small-scale industry, and agricultural productivity, which were essential for balanced economic growth. Next is liberalization in the 1990s. In the early 1990s, the Indian government introduced a major policy shift known as liberalization. As part of this policy, the the government allowed a few private banks to be established. These were referred to as a new generation tech-savvy private banks. The Global Trust Bank was the first such bank to be set up under this new system. It was later merged with the Oriental Bank of Commerce. Other notable new uh, generation private banks include UTI banks, which was later renamed Axis Bank, ICICI Bank, and HDFC Bank. These banks brought innovation and competitiveness into the Indian banking sector. The liberalization process involved active contributions from private, public, and foreign banks, which led to rapid modernization and transformation of the Indian banking system. As a part of ongoing reforms, the next stage in liberalization included proposals for easing foreign direct investment norms in the banking sector. According to the proposal, according to the proposed changes, foreign investors in Indian banks could be allowed voting rights beyond the existing cap of 10%, and this limit has now been raised to 74% with certain restrictions. This shift marked a major step in integrating Indian banking with global standards. The new liberalization policy, introduced in the 1990s, had a dramatic and transformative effect on the Indian banking sector. Before this shift, banking professionals typically operated under what was commonly referred to as the 4 to 6 and 6 to 4 methods, meaning they would borrow at 4% interest, lend at 6%, and go home by 4 p.m. This phrase symbo- uh, sym- symbolized a rigid, low risk, and uncompetitive style of banking. With liberalization, a new wave of reforms brought about a modern and technologically advanced approach to banking. It encouraged banks to adopt tech-savvy methods and become more dynamic and customer focused. This shift contributed significantly to the retail banking boom in India as customers began to demand better services, and banks responded by offering more personalized and accessible financial products. Adoption of IT technology. First is artificial intelligence and generative AI. In recent years, banks have been rapidly advancing in the use of information technology, especially artificial intelligence and generative AI. The slide introduced how these technologies are being embraced by the banking sector to enhance the efficiency, security, and customer experience. The image of the robot labeled generative AI highlights the cutting edge, futuristic nature of this technology. It represents a shift from traditional banking methods to automated, intelligent, and predictive systems that are revolutionizing how financial institutions operate. The use of artificial intelligence and generative AI in the banking has multiple impactful applications. First is fraud detection and risk management. Banks are using based machine learning based fraud detection systems that monitor and analyze the real-time transaction to identify unusual behavior or anomalies. This helps in preventing fraudulent activities and improving the overall security of banking operations. Second, operations and customer service. Through RPA, robotic process automation, and AI-powered chatbots, banks have streamlined the various operational tasks such as know your customer KYC processes, loan processing, and providing 24 by 7 customer support. This has led to faster service, lower cost, and improve the customer satisfaction. Next is transformative partnership. Leading financial institutions like JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo have begun collaborating with AI companies to integrate the generative AI into their workflows. These partnerships aim to transform internal processes, boost productivity, and offer more innovative financial solutions. Second is cloud, hybrid, and multi-cloud infrastructure. Banks around the world are increasingly shifting towards cloud, hybrid, and multi-cloud infrastructure models. This move, this move supports scalability, enhances the resilience, and allows banks to be more flexible and agile in their operations. The image contrasts multi-cloud, that is using multiple different cloud services, with hybrid cloud, that is a mix of private and public cloud environments, showing how both models are crucial for building modern banking platforms that can adapt to rapid changes and growing customer expectations. First is scalability and resilience. Cloud-based core banking platforms help banks scale efficiently while also ensuring operational continuity and flexibility, which are essential during periods of high demand or crisis. Second, data analytics integration. These cloud platforms also allows the integration of data analytics, enabling the banks to offer real-time insights, personalized services, and early risk detection. By using cloud services, banks can analyze vast amounts of customer data instantly and provide the smarter financial solutions. Next is modernization initiatives. Several modernization initiatives around the world illustrate the success of this approach. For example, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia has mitigate, has migrated its infrastructure to AWS, Amazon Web Services, while UniCredit, a major European bank, has partnered with Google Cloud to enhance its digital capabilities. Third is real-time payments and open banking. One major area of IT advancement in banking is the implementation of real-time payment systems and open banking. With real-time payments platforms, customers can transfer money instantly, whether domestically, whether domestically or intentionally. Systems like UPI in India have made such payments seamless and highly efficient, significantly improving the customer experience and banking speed. Uh, open banking, Open banking powered by APIs, application programming interfaces enables banks to integrate with fintech companies, thereby offering enhanced digital products like buy now, pay later services, finance, and other innovative solutions. This collaboration is revolutionizing financial services by making them more accessible and user-centric. Fourth is cybersecurity, quantum security, and tech debt. As banks embrace digital infrastructure, cybersecurity has become a top priority. Many institutions are undertaking cyber upgrades to protect sensitive customer data. For example, Cooperative banks in Uttar Pradesh, India are transitioning to core banking systems hosted on cloud platforms to ensure better security and accessibility. However, the banking, financial services, and insurance sector currently shows low readiness for post post quantum cryptography, scoring below 2.5 out of 5. This lack of preparedness is prompting the creation of frameworks for secure transition to defend against the future threats from quantum computing. Moreover, legacy systems pose serious risk. For example, uh, past out uh, past outages at Barclays Bank highlighted the vulnerabilities of outdated banking infrastructure. To overcome this risk, banks are now using AI-powered predictive systems to maintain resilience and minimize the disruptions. disruptions. Next is RPA, hyperautomation, and agentic AI. Banks are now implementing end-to-end automation through a combination of RPA, that is robotic process automation, and AI, known as hyperautomation. This system allows banks to automate the tasks such as onboarding new customers, underwriting loans, ensuring compliance, system maintenance, and cybersecurity operations. In addition, the concept of agentic AI has taken RPA a step further. Unlike traditional automation, agentic AI can adapt in real time and handle the complex decision making processes, such as determining the loan terms without the need for human intervention. This level of this level of intelligence and automation increases the efficiency, reduces human error, and enhance the customer services. Next is blockchain, digital assets, and CBDCs. Banks have started adopting blockchain technology to improve security, transparency, and efficiency, particularly in maintaining the digital leaders and managing the cross-border transactions. Blockchain helps to reduce the fraud and enhance data transparency, making banking operations more reliable. Additionally, central banks are exploring the introduction of central bank digital currencies (CBDCs). These are digital these are digital tokens similar to cryptocurrencies but issued and regulated by central banks. In India, pilot programs for CBDCs are leveraging the existing UPI infrastructure to implement the digital rupee, offering secure and fast digital transactions under full regulatory control. This expansion of infrastructure. This slide visually illustrates the expansion of banking infrastructure across the country, showing how various elements like ATMs, branches, mobile banking, internet banking, and other banking services are interconnected. It highlights the movement towards a more connected, inclusive, and accessible banking system designed to serve people in both urban and rural areas through modern technology and widespread infrastructures. Expansion of infrastructure. According to recent uh, According to recent research, 58.7% of Indian households are currently availing the banking services. India has approximately One 1 crore 2 lakh 343 branches of scheduled commercial banks. Out of this, 37,953 branches are located in rural areas, while 27,219 are in semi-urban areas. Together, rural and semi-urban branches account for 63% of the total bank branches in these regions. Despite this growth in infrastructure, a large portion of the rural population remains unaware of banking services and their benefits. This indicates that while physical infrastructure has expanded significantly, financial literacy and awareness still lag, especially in rural parts of the country. Bridging this gap is essential for true financial inclusion. The recent surveys indicates a significant increase in banking access compared to 2011, which was the year the last official census was conducted. According to the data, 58.7% of households in India had access to banking services as per the latest findings. However, it is important to note that while the 2011 figures were based on the complete nationwide census, the 2016 figures are based on the survey and must therefore be interpreted with caution. These survey-based numbers are estimates and not absolute counts, so they may not reflect the full ground reality, but still indicate a positive upward trend in banking inclusion. To improve banking inclusion, the government introduced the specific strategies and guidelines. First is decision of opening more branches. Banks were directed to establish branches in every habitation with a population of 5,000 or more in underbanked districts and in 10,000 or more populated areas in other districts. This move was aimed at increasing banking penetration in rural and semi-urban areas. Second, ensuring that each household should have at least one bank account. To ensure financial inclusion, the government instructed banks to make sure that every household has at least one bank account. Banks were assigned to specific areas, such as service areas in rural region or urban wards, to ensure that each family had access to basic banking services. Types of commercial banks in India. Commercial banks in India are categorized under the second schedule of the Reserve Bank of India Act 1934 and are known as the schedule banks. First is public sector banks. These are the banks where the majority shareholding is held by the government. By the government, for example, include Punjab National Bank, State Bank of India, and Central Bank of India, etc. Second, private sector banks. In these banks, the majority ownership lies with the private individuals or entities. Well-known private banks include HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, and Axis Bank. Third is foreign banks. These banks have their headquarters located outside India. For example of foreign sector banks operating in India include Standard Chartered Bank, American Express, and Citibank. In, Next is introduction to public sector banks, meaning and definition. So, Public sector banks are defined as banks in which the government owns more than 50% of the shares. For example, IDBI Bank is considered a public sector bank even though it is not officially nationalized, as the government still holds the majority stake. Because of this government ownership, financial regulations and operations are directly influenced by the government policies and guidelines. Depositors generally feel more secure with public sector banks, believing that their money is safer. As a result, public sector banks tend to have a larger customer base than the private banks. The, the State Bank of India is the largest public sector bank in India, with the Government of India holding more than 63% of its ownership. Additionally, public sector banks also act as developmental institutions by implementing the government programs and schemes. For example, through the Jan Dhan Yojana, public banks have been instrumental in opening the millions of accounts for unbanked individuals, especially in rural areas. This is an example of how public sector banks help fulfill social and developmental goals set by the government. Functions of public sector banks. Public sector banks perform two main categories of functions: primary functions and secondary functions. Under primary functions, they accept deposits such as saving deposit, fixed deposit, current deposit, and recurring deposit. They also grant advances in the form of loans, overdrafts, cash credits, and discounting of bills. The secondary functions include agency functions like the transfer of funds, collection of checks, and acting as trustees or executors. They also offer utility functions, which involve services such as issuing drafts, underwriting locker services, and project promotion programs. These functions reflect how public sector banks serve both individual customers and the larger economy. Functions of public sector banks. First is mobilizing and pooling savings. Public sector banks play a key role in collecting savings from individuals across the country by overcoming transaction cost, and information barriers. They pull these savings and invest them in high return projects that contribute to economic growth. Second is producing information about possible investment and allocating capital. These banks act as financial intermediaries by providing information about profitable investment opportunities and allocating funds accordingly. They help reduce the high cost that individuals face in acquiring information about markets, managers, and firms, thus improving capital allocation efficiency. Third is monitoring investments and exerting corporate governance. As capital providers, public sector banks also monitor how firms use their funds. They help ensure resources are being used effectively, which enhances the corporate governance and helps optimize the overall use of financial resources. Next is facilitating trading, diversification, and management of risk. Public sector banks help manage and mitigate risk faced by individuals, firms, or entire industries. They achieve this by supporting a diversified portfolio of investment, which helps the smooth financial risk time and across the time and generations. Next is facilitating exchange of goods and services. These banks facilitate day-to-day economic transactions by enabling the people and businesses to make and receive payments, ensuring the smooth exchange of goods and services in the market. Next, services. Next is services. Public sector banks offer various customer-friendly facilities, including locker services, loan transfers, and credit. These services make banking accessible, reliable, and convenient for the public. Next is just a second. Features of public sector banks. Features of public sector banks. First is government ownership. Public sector Public sector banks are primarily owned and controlled by the government. For example, the State Bank of India has more than 63% of its shares owned by the government, which ensures public control and regulation. Second is public accountability. These banks are accountable to the general public. They are run by the government with the intention of delivering the better financial services and social welfare to the people, not just profits. Third is service motive. Unlike private banks that focused on maximizing the profits, public sector banks work with a service oriented approach. They aim to provide essential financial services at affordable rates, even if the profits are minimal. Fourth is coverage. Public sector banks are involved in almost every area of economic activity, including rural development, industrial growth, agriculture, and social programs. There is hardly any sector left untouched by the operations of public sector banks, making them vital pillars of national development. This slide presents logos of major government-owned banks in India, also known as public sector banks. These include banks like the State Bank of India, Bank of Baroda, Punjab National Bank, Canara Bank, Union Bank of India, Indian Bank, UCO Bank, Bank of India, Central Bank of India, Indian Overseas Bank, Bank of Maharashtra, Punjab and Sindh Bank, and others. All these banks are either wholly or majorly owned by the Indian government, owned by the Indian government, and are known for providing a wide range of banking services across the country, including in rural and undeserved areas. Public sector banks. Advantages of public sector banks. Public sector banks offer numerous advantages to their customers, which is why millions of people in India prefer to use their services. These advantages include higher trust levels, broader access, and reliability due to government banking. The visual in this slide reinforce the idea that public sector banks are deeply integrated into India's financial systems and are accessible to the general public for various banking needs. First, advantages of public sector banks. First is rate of deposits. Public sector banks typically offer the competitive interest rates on deposits, often higher than those provided by private sector banks. This makes this makes them attractive to depositors, especially in a low interest rate environment. Second is government backing and financial stability. Since these banks are backed by the Government of India, depositors feel more secure. The support from the Reserve Bank of India also reduces financial risk, ensuring stability and trust in the banking system. Public sector banks are also seen as having lower risk exposure and tend to have strong profitability, which adds to depositors' confidence. Third is job security. For job security of employees, public sector bank employees enjoy high job security, unlike in private banks, where layoffs are more common. Government employment offers permanent jobs and stable income, making it a preferred choice for many job seekers. Fourth is charge charges on services. Public sector banks tend to have lower or fewer hidden charges, lower penalties, and more customer-friendly policies related to deposit amounts and service charges. This makes this makes banking affordable and accessible, especially for low and middle income individuals. Fifth is network. Public sector banks have a large branch network that includes both urban and rural areas, while private banks tend to focus on profitable urban markets. Public sector banks serve even remote locations. As of 2020, the number of public sector banks has been consolidated to 12 major banks, which together provide comprehensive coverage across the country. Next is disadvantages of public sector banks. First is technology. Public sector banks lag behind in terms of technology when compared to private sector banks. Second is effect on functioning due to government intervention. Due to the government's ownership stake in these banks, there is a significant level of government intervention. This interference often forces banks to grant the loans not based on merit but due to political pressure, which can result in such loans becoming non-performing assets and NPAs. Third is attitude of the employees. Owning to job security in public sector banks, employees sometimes do not perform at the level expected by customers. As a result, frequent complaints are received about their services, leading many people to switch over to private sector banks. Fourth is scandals and fraud. Many public sector banks have been affected by significant corruption scandals. There have been several fraud cases in recent years, one of the most notable being the Nirav Modi fraud case in Punjab National Bank. Fifth is no profit motive. Public sector bank, public sector banks operate mainly with a service motive rather than a profit motive. Consequently, they may lack the drive to innovate or generate new ideas for their customers. Next is meaning and definition of private sector bank. Uh, till now, anyone have any doubt? So you can ask me.
Can you tell me the, see, I have a question. Can you tell me the importance of public sector bank versus a private sector due to the lack of several service issues, innovations, then so-called job security, uh, service concerns in a public sector. So, what do you say? Uh, Whether this public sector bank should continue or we have to discontinue it? And also, can you highlight what are the benefit and the challenge in the case of private sector? So just want to, I have gone through with your say what is the public sector and private sectors, but just wanted your opinion. Which is the better one, public sector banks or private sector bank with respect to Indian scenario?
According to me, I think public sector bank. According to me, private sector bank is more efficient in modern banking and customer-centric offerings because private sector banks excel in technology adoption and customer service, operational efficiency, and profitability metrics. So they are more offer fa- they are more agile, offer faster services, and cater well to urban customers and those who are seeking innovative products. So I think private sector banks is more beneficial.
But but in a private sector bank, there is a very high attrition rate. In a some private sector bank, this attrition rate is close to 50% annually. Then there is a compromise with respect to the compliances or the surveys or promises by bank employees in a private sector. Lots of the sales pressure, target pressure. So how you say that private sector is uh, meeting the requirement of a system, and most of the private sector banks are lacking their branch network in rural areas. They are more focused in a central or say the urban cities, and in urban cities also they are more focused on prime areas where they can get a more wealthy customers.
Private sector banks, like they are providing faster services and better customer support. They are using advanced technology and mobile banking also, more competitive with innovation like digital banking. And currently, I am talking about the customer point of approach. So that's why private sector bank.
But if you visit in a private sector, you will find uh, the deduct amount from a customer as a average monthly balance, average quarterly balance criteria, SMS charges, email charges, email alerts, SMS alert charges, then mobile banking charges, and many other things like debit card charges, which is also significantly high. Then average monthly, average quarterly balance, non-maintenance of these charges. Then you will find in a private sector, they are mostly employees are engaged in a third party product sales like insurance, mutual funds, fixed deposits, uh, such things like NPS and many others like PMS as well, portfolio management service. So these private sector banks, somewhere uh, they are targeting clients to sell third party products and less banking, more about sales. And that is also the one fact. Somewhere it is also the you can relate that these private banks are having their various other entities like mutual funds, PMS, AIF, insurance. So somewhere they also share their clients' data with these entities, and then customers start receiving a call from broking companies or insurance or mutual funds or say PMS, AIF. So uh, a normal customer can see if he has left some amount in a bank account. Maybe after 2, 3 years, his bank account will be zero after some time. And retention rate is very poor. So when employee is not retaining, not sustaining in a company, how can employee committed to the customer? There are the use mis-selling happens.
Okay. So do they have matlab, they have charges, but according to me, the services does they offer that values the charges as well. So uh, when we speak about public sector banks, the process is usually cause a lot of delays. So and retention rate. Uh, Speaking about the retention rate, the public sector does have a good retention rate, but that comes with the pension and all those schemes.
But if your bank is the government PSU bank is paying a pension, then what's the problem in it? While now this pension is it's already it's a uh, all the time uh, all time uh, they I mean they were paying a pension, but now there is no as such a pension to new employees. I think this is they stopped almost last 15 or 20 years back. So there is no pension criteria in a government PSUs or uh, in a government job. See, a client data which is circulated to the various investment entities. Most of the private sector banks are having their investment arms like a mutual fund, PMS, AIF, stock broking, uh, insurance. Then how is that client data? That is a common practice in a market. The client data goes to these entities, and then they start receiving call. They're targeting, okay, you are having that much amount to balance in your account, and you receive a call from a stock broking or mutual funds or something. That happens. Is that common practice or not?
Yes, yes, yes.
It is, you can compare with let me tell you the scenario. Like in a colleges, there is a government college. Like you can say in engineering, there is a IIT, NITs, or triple IITs, or state government college. And there are the similarly in a management also there is IIMs or uh, in a IITs they have a management program, NITs they have a management program. So they have a certain criteria of student admission. They have a limited bandwidth means, okay, we will take 60 students or some around, right? But and they have a
yes,
proper infrastructure, proper staff is there, professors are there. They have a professor-student ratio maintaining their full-time faculty is there. But if you have to look at it in a scenario in a private colleges, you will find there is a one college having a 10 there another you know college in a different locations, and they have a intact. I mean, there is a no limit. I have seen the colleges having a 500, 600 seats in a management in a one location and having a presence in a multiple locations. So they are something like a printing degrees. So is that really valuing qualification or say valuing the to students like providing degrees, and also there is a use pressure on these colleges, and that is now their common practices which is the colleges following is okay, we will make a 8 or 9 CGPA at least to
yes,
every student. Right. Now the student is it is less a student, it is more kind of a customer.
yes,
So uh, the education standard is compromised. Uh, they have a very few full-time faculties, and those are full-time faculties. Their uh, quality is also compromised. Then mostly there are the visiting faculties. Then with respect to evaluation, which is also be a preset their standard, and they also somewhere they disclose the what the evaluation is going. And same thing happen in the final year, I mean in midterm or final evaluation. And finally, students make say easily 9 or 8, 9 or 10 CGPA. That is common thing happens in a private.
yeah,
So what do you think so?
okay,
And manipulating in placements, showing a high package while hiding the fact that this placement in a Singapore, Dubai, or US, showing amount in a lakhs. The placement happen of 83 lakhs, but displacement is in a US. So
yes,
83 lakhs in US is I mean, it's a very basic level.
yes,
Same thing happen in Dubai or Qatar or Singapore,
Singapore,
right? And another thing is
yes,
like CTC. So CTC also be having a very small fixed component, and large component is a variable, but it makes CTC is higher. So
yes,
and somewhere there the colleges are going to having a collaboration with corporates. Okay, you take our
yes,
students. Uh, Suppose you have a requirement of 5 candidates, you take 50 candidates, and after 6 months you
yes,
can fire 45 candidates, not a problem. And somewhere they have make the payment to colleges for that. Okay, you take a 50 candidates, so additional 45 candidates, we will bear the cost. Somewhere this type of a collaboration is also in a practice. So how can you say the private is
yes,
meeting the standard? Private is more and more, you can say it's a compromise.
yes,
See, in a small one room, they are running a computer engineering, and there are say hundreds of students getting a computer engineering degree. And same thing happen in case of a management.
yes,
Then how can you say that is private is doing that? See, in our country, somewhere uh, entities believe in that how to band these rules, and rules are really very strict, but application of these rules and regulations are compromised because ultimately human being is going to execute, no? So these
yes, yes,
regulatory bodies or inspection bodies, They also know that if we are going with the strictly, then hardly anyone would be able to comply this. So then there
Yes,
is a compromise happen. So now you can see there are the lakhs of people are passing great engineering, managements.
yes, yes,
What is the quality coming?
right.
Right. That
Yes,
is the real challenge in our economy. If we have to look at it,
yes, yes.
because the kind of environment students are grooming in the colleges, they are thinking that okay, we are okay, we are administrative guy, MBA, Master in Business Administration. What to do with them? If we are going to assigning them tasks, they say, ki, no, no, sir, this is not the our thing.
Mm,
We are going to take an administrative task. Give us something like a CEO, CFO level. They don't want to be touch the basic things. They don't have any touch when they enter in a market to the basic things, and then it is creating a huge gap. Having a degrees like engineering, MBA, but not having a basic touch of key concepts, then it makes them uh, difficult to absorb by companies. Right. Same thing happen in case of I'm just coming to the point. Is the private banks and government.
yes, yes,
They are having a high attrition rate. When an employee is not retaining for a period of 1 year, 2 years, what you can expect from them? Will they deliver a quality service? Will they uh, going with some due diligence compliances or something? Hardly they go. They have a huge pressure, target pressure of
right,
selling a third party products. Now in a
right,
many
right.
many private banks, uh, team leader or say what they have a KPI, key performance indicator. They don't consider
Mm,
your say the client satisfactions or something. They are strictly going to okay, how much insurance you sold, how much premium you have collected,
right, right,
right? How much mutual funds you sold. What the, and insurance itself, they are going with like how much traditional plan you sold, right?
right.
So that's a major challenge in these banking sectors.
Mm,
Okay, fine, continue. Uh,
okay, okay. So next is meaning and definition of private sector banks. So private sector banks are financial institutions where private individuals or private companies own a major share of the bank's equity. These banks are not controlled by the government, which allows them to develop independent strategies for serving their customers. Private sector banks in India are divided into two categories: old generation private sector banks and new generation private sector banks. After the nationalization of most After the nationalization of most banks, those not nationalized came to be known as the old generation private banks. However, following the liberalization policy in the 1990s, several new banks like HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, and Axis Bank emerged as new generation private sector banks. The banking sector in India had significantly evolved with the rise of private sector banks, whose growing presence has led to increased availability of quality services and goods to the customers. These banks have also contributed to healthy competition in the economy by motivating the public sector banks to improve and modernize. Private sector banks play an important role in the development of the Indian economy. This slide displays a visual list of various private sector banks operating in India. This includes major banks such as Axis Bank, HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, Kotak Mahindra Bank, and Yes Bank. Other recognized banks like Federal Bank, IndusInd Bank, Bandhan Bank, IDFC Bank, IDFC First Bank, RBL Bank, South Indian Bank, CSB Bank, DCB Bank, and many others. It also includes the IDBI Bank, which was reclassified as a private sector bank. This bank represents the diversity and competition within the private banking sectors in India. Next is functions of private sector banks. First is offering high degree of professional management. So the private sector banks help in introducing a high degree of professional management and marketing concepts into banking. This helps the public sector banks as well to develop similar skills and technology. Second is creates healthy competition. The private sector banks provide a healthy competition which helps in improving the general efficiency levels in the banking systems. Third is encourages foreign investment. The private sector banks, especially the foreign banks, have much influence on encouraging foreign investment in the country. Fourth is helps to access foreign capital markets. The foreign banks in the private sector help Indian companies and government agencies to meet their financial requirements from the international capital markets. Fifth is help to develop the innovation and achieve expertise. The private sector banks are always trying to innovate new products, avenues, such as new schemes and services, and help industries achieve expertise in their respective fields by offering quality service and guidance. Six is innovation. The private sector banks always strive to provide the best possible products to their customers, such as new schemes for mutual funds and bonds. They aim to provide the quality goods and services. Next is advantages of private sector banks. First is privacy. Privacy is a primary benefit of private sector banks. Customer dealings typically remain anonymous, which attracts many customers. Second is discounted services. Private sector clients receive discounted or preferential pricing on products and services. They receive tailor-made services at a reasonable rate. Third is dedicated representative. One of the biggest advantage of private sector banks is, is that they consist of a dedicated representative or a group of people who already knew the customer's issues. This helps in making the transaction easier for the customer without even making a personal visit. Next is operational efficiency. In terms of operational efficiency, the private sector banks are far better than the public sector banks. The private sector banks always try to upgrade their services and provide innovative products to attract the customers. Fifth is personal attention. Customers love personal attention. One of the main factors of customer satisfaction is personal attention. The private sector banks provide personalized services and also give special attention to their customers. This helps them in retaining the customers, which the public sector banks lack. Sixth is other perks and privileges. The customer of private sector banks received various perks and privileges. For example, every bank appoints a customer relationship manager who helps look after the dealings of their customers. The documents pertaining to the customers are often collected from the customer's home, which is not the case in public sector banks. Next is disadvantages of private sector banks. First is imbalance in growth. Private sector banks often avoid setting up branches in rural areas due to insufficient deposits, which can result in an imbalance in growth. This lack of banking presence might negatively affect the overall development of the rural areas, leaving them underdeveloped. Second is no branches in rural areas. Private sector banks are generally reluctant to open branches in rural regions. As a result, banking facilities are concentrated in urban areas, dep- depriving the rural communities of necessary banking services. Third is no job security. One of the major disadvantages of working in private sector banks is the lack of job security. Employees may be declared surplus, which contributes to increased unemployment rates. Next is customer welfare. Private sector banks primarily aim to earn high profits. They might increase interest rates and service charges, which may not always be favorable to customers. This focus on profitability may result in neglect of customer welfare. Fifth is average employees. Private sector banks often have limited tolerance for average performers or slow learners. Employees who are not capable of handling challenging tasks may not be hired or retained, which can result in fewer opportunities for such individuals. Objectives first is to know the awareness level of investors towards public sector banks and private sector banks, to examine the growth in financial performance of both public and private sector banks, to understand the customer satisfaction levels in choosing between the public and private sector banks, to identify any gaps in understanding the customer needs and suggest appropriate measures to fulfill those requirements. Next is scope of the study. The scope of the study is to collect first-hand information on customers' perception of public sector banks and private sector banks. Second is the geographical scope of the study is confined to areas within the Mumbai division. Third is the functional scope involves identifying customers' level of awareness regarding public and private sector banks. Fourth is since banking plays a crucial role in income planning, this project aims to access the level of awareness among individuals about both banking sectors. Limitations. Although the research has successfully achieved its objective, there are some unavoidable limitations encountered during the study. Uh, First is some respondents provided answers and did not take the survey seriously, making it difficult to collect the accurate data. Some respondents were hesitant to share information related to their financial matters, leading to gaps in the data sets. There was an insufficient amount of data available on this topic, which limited the depth of analysis. The study was restricted only to the Mumbai region, and as such, the information collected may not accurately represent the situation in other parts of Mumbai or other geographical locations. Next is public sector versus private sector banks, difference and comparisons. Public sector banks are public sector banks are owned and operated by the government. Their main purpose is to fulfill the broader socio-economic objectives such as promoting financial inclusion and supporting developmental initiatives. These banks prioritize the public welfare and service delivery. In contrast, uh, private sector banks are owned by private individuals or corporate entities and operate with a profit-driven approach. They focus on providing the innovative, efficient, and customer-centric services to stay competitive in the market. Key takeaways. First is public sector banks are owned and controlled by the government, while private sector banks are owned and private individuals or entities. Second is private sector banks generally offer more competitive services and interest rates, whereas public sector banks often provide more accessible banking services to rural and low income groups. Third is public sector banks mainly focus on financial inclusion and national economic goals, while private sector banks emphasize profit maximization and shareholder value. This is the difference. Private sector banks are composed of firms that are privately owned by individuals These banks usually aim to maximize the profits and include various types of firms such as sole proprietorship, partnership, private limited companies, and public limited companies. Public sector banks are comprised of firms owned by the government. Their primary aim is to provide the essential services rather than generate profit. These banks often operate in sectors that involve the national importance, such as natural monopolies and defenses.